years, the best scientists around the world have been trying to come up with a way to quantify combining fear and fun, and finding a way to measure that. And other than using a Hostess Twinkie, there has been numerous ways different shows, different movies, different comics have all attempted to figure out if you could just bring fear and fun together, you would have the ultimate toy. And, well, that pretty much happened in Masters of the Universe with the character that has become one of the most beloved, and that is Scareglow. While he shipped late in the line, Scareglow has consistently been a #1 bestseller, most watched, most anticipated character whenever he shows up in the content. And he's a relatively simple character with a very iconic motif. He's a skeleton with a big purple cape, what can I say? But he also glows in the dark, and that's a big part of it. And he kind of looks like Skeletor. Well, Scareglow has shown up in virtually every single Masters of the Universe toy line in every possible form factor, from action figures to Funko Pops to novelty items to Mega Blocks. Scareglow is a mainstay not only in the brand, but he gets disproportionately used in a lot of toys and in a lot of fan art. And there's a reason for this. There's a reason that Scareglow has climbed his way to the top, even though he was a very late addition to the Masters of the Universe line. As a toy, as a character, and as a consumer product needing to be mass-produced, Scareglow essentially does the absolute impossible.
We've done the impossible. That makes us mighty.
You see, he's a good character, meaning he's an awesome, fun, popular character. He's cheap and fast. I'll explain what that means, but hitting all of these is not something industry is able to do. By the time Scareglow came along, Masters of the Universe and the vintage line had really hit its peak, and most of the action figures that were coming out were fully sculpted, fully tooled, and they had action features that were embedded inside as a mechanism, meaning it had a lot of engineering, a lot of parts, a lot of working parts, and they were a lot more complicated than the original action figures that came out in '82, whose action figures was usually just a swivel waist. Now, Scareglow came along very late in the line and brought back very much that original appeal, where it was a basic figure with very few new parts and no mechanism-based action feature, such as, Tongue Lasher here, whose tongue could come in and out of his body. That was an action feature that required mechanics and engineering and additional parts that were embedded inside of the torso of the figure. Scareglow came out in a line very, very late that was accompanied by other figures like Clampchamp, Ninjor, and Randor. This was in direct relationship to retail saying to Mattel brand managers at the time, we need more He-Man toys. They're selling really quickly. Well, there was a misunderstanding, and the brand managers thought that meant, more original characters. What retail really meant was, we need more He-Man, because you can't find the original version of He-Man on shelf. But because of this misunderstanding, Mattel produced a wave of figures with almost no new tooling. Randor had a head, Ninjor had a head and accessories. His cloth shirt did not need to be tooled because, fabric is not tooled. Clampchamp was a head with an accessory, and the accessory had the action feature in it. He used Fisto's armor the way Randor used Jitsu's. And Scareglow was a head. That was it, because the cape was soft goods and the accessory was from the original Castle Grayskull weapon rack. So all of these figures were extremely minimal to tool, which meant they could get to market very, very quickly to fill that request for more figures. And to give Scareglow an action feature, he was given glow-in-the-dark skin or glow-in-the-dark plastic, which is relatively cheap compared to getting a character that can ooze blood or spit out its tongue or have a suction cup feature. Glow-in-the-dark is a very, very beloved and fun feature for kids that has been used almost universally in almost every toy line since modern plastic came around in the 50s and 60s. And a big reason for that is it represents a conquering of the dark and a friendly face out there. Because, of course, the darkness is something that kids inherently are afraid of, and having a nightlight or something that glows in the dark represents the ability for the child to overcome the darkness that comes with something like bedtime or being in, a dark room. So here you have Scareglow getting an action feature that's incredibly inexpensive to produce and is already beloved by kids. And the idea of glow-in-the-dark skeletons, there's practically a holiday just about glow-in-the-dark skeletons. We all know this holiday. We celebrate it by eating candy. It's called Arbor Day. So having Scareglow in the line so late was a direct, really, relationship between Mattel producing figures to fill a gap and get more characters out there quickly, but retail really saying, no, we don't need new characters, we need more He-Man, we need more Skeletor, because you can't find the original version of He-Man and Skeletor on shelf at this point. So that misunderstanding led to the birth of one of the most popular characters. And he came with one of the most popular mini-comics, or rather important mini-comics, from the vintage line, because the search for Keldor, not only did it introduce Ninjor and Scareglow as characters, but it was the first hint of Skeletor's origin, and the fact that he would one day be revealed to be Keldor, Randor's older brother, his half-brother, his half-Gar brother. So, a very, very important figure that was produced quickly, was really good, really great as far as popularity, and was relatively cheap to do. That impossible thing when it comes to consumer products, and especially toys. Scareglow managed to pull this off and remain popular for decades. And that's a big reason he shows up in almost every Masters of the Universe toy line. So what about Masters of the Universe Classics? Well, that was the first time we were able to really expand on his background and tell his full, true story. Because when he showed up in that original mini-comic, he was just sort of summoned by Skeletor. Well, this was a chance to not only do a collector version of Scareglow, and this was actually the second Scareglow figure ever. This was sort of before the modern renaissance of so many different form factors, from Super 7 and Funko and the rest. Now, looking back at the original figure, his title on his card was noted as Evil Ghost of Skeletor, and this led to a lot of confusion, and it didn't help that even in the mini-comic he introduced himself as the Ghost of Skeletor. But does that mean he's literally the ghost of Skeletor, as in Skeletor dies and becomes a ghost to, haunt you and blah? Or was it the idea that he was a ghost of Skeletor, like a stormtrooper of Darth Vader, or, a warrior of, an army, if you will? So we wanted to clarify that. And it really didn't make sense that Skeletor was going to have a ghost because he's alive. I guess time travel, but it was clarified by giving him the tagline, Evil Ghost Serving Skeletor, to make it clear that this was not Skeletor in ghost form, but was a different character altogether that was just a ghost, but he was in the service of Skeletor. And of course, we had to make that new figure in Classics have the same action feature, glowing in the dark, because it was easy to do. You just use glow-in-the-dark plastic. It doesn't require a mechanism, which we couldn't afford to do in Classics. But if the action feature required simply a plastic type, well, easy to do. Now, every Masters of the Universe Classics figure had two accessories, except for Sorot, and that's a story for another time. And when I asked the Horsemen to come up with a second accessory for Scareglow, they came up with one of the coolest ever, this reliquary that was chained by a real metal chain to his arm. And in fact, I was so blown away by this accessory that his bio was completely rewritten, and his backstory. So if you open up the reliquary, there's a Castle Grayskull plug there that holds it in. Well, there's a key. And as the Horseman explained, this was very much like Marley's Ghost from Charles Dickens. And of course, anytime you can get a Charles Dickens reference into a Masters of the Universe toy line, you almost have to do it. Or a Monty Python Charles Dickens reference. Either way, Charles Dickens is awesome, and the whole idea of Marley's Ghost was essentially that Scareglow also had to lug around the crimes of his life as this reliquary. And inside the Castle Grayskull styled tube is a key. And his bio, of course, also included the line of copy that was from his original toy that he bursts out and scares people with fright, explaining what his power is. And although I think I definitely distinctly remember people online saying that adding this line at the end of the bio sounded kooky and terrible, but it was actually the only vintage line used in the bio. So the bio reveals that Scareglow used to be a bounty hunter named Carrick Null. Now, we never actually got to make a Carrick Null action figure, but because Scareglow is so popular and because Masters of the Universe fans are so talented, that several, well, many, I shouldn't just say several, came up with ideas for what Carrick Null could have looked like in life as a more human character, whether he's a human or an alien, but in other words, not a ghost. In other words, what was his corporeal form? There was even a fan-made mini-comic of Carrick Null that told the story of him in life and even incorporated in the head sculpt the scar that Scareglow has. So whether it was original Carrick Null bios, figure accessories, figure customs, or original comics, the fans really stepped up and fleshed out who this character is and how cool he could have looked like in his backstory. Which again is noted he was a bounty hunter, and one of the things that he took up as a bounty, as a task, was being paid to break into Castle Grayskull. And that's where the whole reliquary comes from, and that is where the curse and how he became a Scareglow from his humanoid form. So let's dive into that a little bit. So, tasked with breaking into Castle Grayskull, obviously it's not easy to do. Skeletor has tried to do it in 126 out of 130 Filmation episodes and never seems quite to do it. Now, the main door of Castle Grayskull is well known by fans and pop culture at mass. It's a giant drawbridge, get it? Drawbridge, and it's accessed by inserting the power sword as a power key into a small groove which opens up the drawbridge. But Castle Grayskull has another entrance, and I'm not talking about that window way up high. It actually does, going back to the vintage toy, have a back door. And as we all know, having a back door is always a good idea, except when it's not. But in a castle, in a fortress, it is. And it's been incorporated into a lot of the toys of Castle Grayskull over the years. In particular, when we did the Masters of the Universe Classics Castle Grayskull, I was very, very adamant that the back door also incorporate the elements from Scareglow's bio and relate back to his backstory. So, how do we do that? Well, the key that is inside the reliquary, it can be removed, obviously, but the idea is that Scareglow can't do this because he's cursed. He has to just carry it around with him. But this key, if inserted into the back door of the castle playset from Classics, will open the door. It's basically the only way to get the door open. I mean, you could pick at it or, shove a pencil in there or something, but yeah, if you have the Scareglow figure and you pull the key out of the reliquary, it will fit into the Classics door and open it perfectly to represent the crime that cursed Carrick Null and turned him into a Scareglow. And you may notice that I continue to call him a Scareglow because, yes, Scareglow is not his name like Stinkor or Merman. Well, actually, no, Stinkor or Merman's not the character's names either. But Scareglow, and someone who's been cursed because they were trying to break into Castle Grayskull in life, well, that's it's a species, like the Beastmen or Merman's people, if you will. And this was established in some of the comic books that came out in the mid-2000s discussing how Scareglows haunt the forests of Eternia, and when kids go out late at night, they're told stories by their parents, don't go out or the Scareglows will get you. As an example, in the Lost Night issue of Masters of the Universe from DC, there are two kids running through the forest, and as they flee the Beastmen army, they specifically note that they need to get out of this forest or the Scareglows will get them. So he's not just a one-time guy named Scareglow, he represents a cursed monster type that haunts the forests of Eternia. And there are other Scareglows out there too. So hey, all the more reason to go out and buy multiple Scareglow action figures, because you can army build Scareglows now. It's not just, some dude with a purple cape. He represents a species or a type of paranormal character that haunt forests, and there's many of them out there. So, somebody get me the Ghostbusters. We can take care of this problem if He-Man would just find a paranormal exterminator. But beyond that, Scareglow is going to remain a threat. And in whatever form and whatever new content comes out, he remains extremely popular. A figure that was cheap to make, was made fast, and remains really, really great and popular. A character and an action figure that truly does the impossible. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any other questions or comments, thoughts on Scareglow, or even other things like Arbor Day, leave them in the comments below, and I'd love to answer them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.